So I'm here with my friend Michael. Michael, you're sitting where? I'm in Sylvan Lake, Alberta.
I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota, in the lower 48.
Right on. Well, it's been a while since we talked. It's good to see you. We've talked, texted,
Yes.
and some audio back and forth, social audio and stuff. Unusual times for sure.
It is indeed the first time we actually sit, even though mediated, but face to face. We've never even done that before. So,
Yeah, I thought we did when you did your life compass. No, we did that over the phone.
we did that. We did it via audio. We did not ever actually meet face to
Oh,
face. So
okay.
it's great. It's great to see you.
Didn't scare you away.
Not yet, but I'm sitting at a safe distance, so it's all good.
Michael refers to himself as a philosopher's in a linebacker's body. I guess I'm a philosopher in a couch potato's body.
There's a story behind this actually. It's about 8 years ago, give or take. I lived in Fargo. I taught at NDSU, and a photographer came through town, and somehow through my intercultural teaching, I was involved with a group of Kurdish refugees. And that photographer stopped by at their community office, if you will. And somehow I was invited to this. I have no idea how, but somehow I ended up there. And he took portraits, pictures. He was on this cruise across the US. And every person that came in front of his camera, he gave a little blackboard to with a piece of chalk and said, well, since you cannot speak in the photograph, write down on the chalkboard how people should see you.
Huh.
And what they should know about you, which I found to be an incredibly intriguing concept, really. And okay. I was just standing there. I was like, wow, how do I want people to perceive me? And then it kind of dawned on me. It's like by psychological and intellectual makeup, I'm perhaps a little more philosopher than my physical appearance suggests. So I am 6'2", I'm 250 some pounds. And so I figured, yeah, I'm really just a philosopher kind of trapped in a linebacker's body. And this is where that came from.
Okay.
Story time.
Cool. Story time. Yeah, welcome to story time. the Zoomified version. Well, I mean, it's maybe we can we'll leave politically correct conversation out of this, and we'll just have straight talk, if it's okay with you. I'm pretty sure that's
you know me. Yes, absolutely.
But I think the thing, I mean, it's interesting because coaching people, working with people, one of the things that we work to help people build mental and emotional resilience so they can live the greatest version of themselves. And I suppose every life coach that would say the same thing. The thing that's interesting is that I was thinking about this morning, thinking about the fact that we're going to be talking, is that there's this, it's like we've been riding along through our life in this high-powered vehicle, and then suddenly the engine quits and someone jams on the emergency brake unexpectedly. And now it's like you're locked in this situation, and now what? And so the thing that strikes me is like we've had an effect. One of the things we talk about is that to focus forward, and focus on movement, not perfection. Now, it struck me this morning, oh my God, how we may have an opportunity to begin to take parts of our program into post-secondary education. We'll see how that turns out. But we start thinking about, you know, how do we talk about moving forward and focusing forward and imagining when the status quo has been totally turned upside down, and it comes down to what goes on between our ears. And you said the reason we're doing this because you sent a message saying, Greg, I think I'm going to start my consultancy again. And it's about communication, I think, right?
Communication and psychology.
Right. So, I mean, there probably isn't a greater time that as a society or as a group, you know, as individuals or as a group, that we learn to master the gray matter between our ears, the messages that go on within our box.
Right.
And, you know, I said this early on, that our world's never going to be the same.
It won't be for quite a while, but I think history also suggests that we are an incredibly resilient species. We recover and then we are hell-bent of making the same mistakes again, just with a little more technological progress in between the last setback and the next one. So in a very, I would say, pragmatic view of humanity, I don't necessarily see us shifting course for all too long after we are coming out of this pandemic, because greed is still the human driver for too many people on this planet. I don't think that those who are trying to exploit others are suddenly going to wisen up and see the light of day and realize that after I have, I don't know, let's just arbitrarily pick a number, $100 million, that I'm set for life. I don't need more. No, there is some momentum in some dysfunction, for the lack of better words, that keeps them moving forward. And particularly in the US, we see this at a very pronounced level. Am I seeing this changing in the long run? No. In the short run, perhaps, yes. In the long run, no, we're going to fall right back into our old ways. Again, because history suggests exactly that. And we haven't changed throughout times. And yes, that may be classified as a very dark perspective and very critical towards humanity. But I really just would want to caution everyone that this is really just pure realism.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because reality is what we make it. See, there's the way. See, there's the way I think things should be. There's the way I think I want things to be, and then there's the way the frig it is. And anything, in my opinion, anything other than me looking at and saying that, looking and deciding, give myself permission to say, this is the way it is. Anything other than that is going to bring pain, frustration, anxiety, and fatigue. Is the secret to coping through this, in my opinion, is the way things are. Seeing things the way they are. Now, it happens to be when people ask Buddha what he was about, he says, I teach the way things are.
But not to go all too deep down the rabbit hole of philosophy or psychology in that sense. What kind of reality are you referring to? And I think therein lies the sticking point, really, because your reality may have some of the same colors, but the shading and the elements in between those colors are different between yours and mine.
Right. So that's you're speaking to the interpretation.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way things, when I say the way things are, it's what's in front of me. What's in front of me right now is, we started self-isolating back around around the 10th or 12th of March.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's been about 3 weeks, almost. On last Wednesday night, I had a sore throat, and by law, I have to self-isolate. We're practicing social distancing within our home, physical distancing. But the symptoms disappeared as soon as I got off the phone. But I think it was a result of allergic reaction to me doing wood burning. I took up a new hobby, breathing in smoke because I'm allergic to trees. So it's a kind of a given. But so I have a sensitivity that way. But so we're practicing it. So that's the way things are. Is that right now we're practicing physical social distancing, and we're utilizing curbside pickup for groceries. Go to Walmart; they were phenomenal in terms of how they handled it. Amy didn't have to get out of the vehicle. They opened the back, stuck it in there, done. There was no, so it was handled really well. So that's the way things are. And the way things are, our government has made major moves both on a provincial and a federal level. The feds are subsidizing employee wages by 75%, which I hoped would happen. I'm surprised as hell it's going to happen. So in Canada, we've got 1/10 of your population with everything they've announced, probably $1 trillion in Canadian dollars, $1 trillion of supports already planned. And they said they're not limiting how much it's going to take. But we also have the strongest balance sheet of any country in the G20, supposedly, financial balance sheet.
Yeah, it's a little different down here. I mean, the 2.2 trillion recovery package or assistance package, I forgot the exact terminology, was just passed or written into law. Every American is getting a one-time payment of $1,200 up to an income of $99,000. After that, the individual doesn't get anything. It is supposedly being direct deposited into the recipient's bank account, provided that the IRS does have bank account information. Right. Otherwise, a check will be sent out. And it's a one-time payment. And the discrepancy here with it is actually on the other side, if you will, in that we are seeing unprecedented unemployment application numbers right now.
Yeah, I saw that. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, 50% of Americans attain their health insurance through employment.
Yeah, that's going to be that has the potential to be catastrophic because you lose your health insurance. Do Correct. You? If you become unemployed?
Yes. So the options are, and again, I'm not a human resources specialist or an economist, so take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. But the options once you are being laid off, for instance, are to claim something called COBRA, which is an extension of your insurance coverage that was provided through your employer, but it's self-paid. And it costs anywhere between $300, $500, $600 per month or more, depending on your individual situation. So if you don't want to do that, you can go on the open market and try to find insurance coverage. That is actually based on your income. Now, if you don't have your regular income, you're still getting probably unemployment because you were just reduced in force due to a layoff. And they are taking your unemployment income into consideration. Those insurance packages are anywhere between $300, $500, $700 per month, again, depending on your individual situation, family, size, and so forth, plus co-pays of $2,000, $5,000, $20,000, depending again on the package, on your individual situation, and on the nature of the claim. And your unemployment commonly runs out after 6 months at the latest, at which point there's very little recourse for you to continue having any sort of income. And while I think, looked towards the gig economy, like driving for Uber or Lyft or something like that. Right. Well, that's pretty much not advisable right now either. Amazon, granted, is hiring 100,000 some people right now for warehouse jobs and so forth. Well, they just had numerous occurrences of COVID-19 in their own packing facilities. So yeah, you might be losing your job here, but then you're gonna potentially expose yourself to the virus over there. So it's a lose-lose proposition.
Oh, it's gigantic. I mean, the implications, the catastrophic waterfall
Yeah.
is, you just, I mean, it's so it's that's the way things are.
That's the way the things currently are. I mean, I don't want to call it stimulus package, but perhaps it's what it is. A safety, disaster, loan package, what have you.
Yeah.
The $2.2 trillion, I think 350 billion of those are going towards small business, 500 billion towards larger businesses or something like that. I don't know the exact distribution of it, but it's easy to find out. Just essentially Google for it. But there is an application process for small businesses, and we just did this yesterday for my wife's two businesses, to apply for local funding, which goes through your state, which is capped at, in Minnesota, at 35,000 per small business.
And that's a loan or a grant?
That's a loan that comes at 0% interest rates and can potentially be partially forgiven.
Okay.
Depending again on the situation and how you're actually using those funds. Up to 35,000, which for some businesses is a lot of runway. For others, it's a drop in the bucket. But it's better than nothing. Minnesota has currently $20 million available, which is shockingly little when you consider that the entire state.
How quick is that going to go?
Good question. It's going to go pretty quick. And I think the governor is in the process of signing a new piece of legislation that actually ups those funds. The federal side of things, and this is where it gets concerning, let's put it that way, is yes, there's SBA, so Small Business Administration, disaster funding available if you qualify, and there are certain stipulations that you have to fulfill. $2.2 trillion, and the loan comes to the small business at an interest rate of 3.75%.
So you get to go further in debt.
Exactly.
And
the federal rate is currently zero.
Assumes you can service the debt.
Well, that's for one, the assumption. The federal rate is currently at 0%. The banks that are servicing the SBA funding, I'm guessing, are getting some nominal servicing fee. Not exactly sure how that's being negotiated. So again, there are probably more educated people out there that can weigh in on that. But the 3.75 really irks me wrong, because even if you get 6 months grace period after we have recovered, or maybe it starts right away once you receive the funds, you have 6 or perhaps 12 months if you can make a case for it to start repaying that. Well, for one, we don't know how long this is going to last.
True.
We don't know how much in a hole, quote unquote, we are, how far back set we are.
You have no way to predict your cash flow.
Exactly.
The only thing you know is your overhead cost to maintain operations. That's the only thing you have control over.
So there are two lines of thinking on that. For one, if you don't have that, the majority of small businesses don't have more than a couple of weeks, maybe a month worth of runway, 2 at the most if you're conservative on the front end, having saved. So this is really a very precarious situation. So if you don't have that availability of funding, it's almost certain that you're going to go under. If you do have the availability of funding, you're buying yourself a quote unquote cheap insurance policy of 3.75% interest. Maybe you don't have to touch the money, then you just pay it back at 3.75.
Right.
And you don't accumulate the long run of interest, right?
Okay.
But if you do need it, you're probably better off to actually have the availability, even at the interest rate, just to give yourself a shot at making it. And the grotesqueness behind all this is simply that if small business goes away, the country is doomed.
Yeah, well, and that's why, that's why our government, because within a week of them asking us to basically, they didn't use the word shelter in place, but essentially that's what they were saying. Within a week, there were 1 million people in Canada applied for unemployment insurance, which gives them about $573 Canadian per week, and with a zero waiting period, and I think it's 9 months of benefit, but then potentially, but it's not clear whether the sickness benefit would kick, the sickness portion is also a sickness benefit, whether that would kick in after or before. But they've simplified the whole thing in Canada. If you can't work because of the crisis, they're basically topping it up to $2,000 a month for 4 months, and then they'll review it. And so if you can't work because of the COVID thing, which is basically, I think if you've had $5,000 of reported earned income in the previous year, and you're unable to work, you would qualify for this. But that's, again, short term, right? So there's all these different measures and things that are taking place. But, so the way things are is everything's stopped. And that, so, I wrote this book years ago, 2007, this one came out. And in the book, the main thing is that when you do a business plan, because a business plan is about putting together a strategic and tactical plan with financial projections so that you can show somebody that's going to lend you money that you're going to be able to pay it back. And it's only as good as the assumptions that you examine and can get concrete numbers around and be realistic about. The problem is now, how do you assess what all the assumptions have changed?
The assumption has changed, the math has changed, the forecasts have changed, the product viability. I mean, nothing is as it used to be right now. Doesn't mean that this is a state that's going to last forever.
No.
But at present time, I think it's quite ill-advised to start a brand new outfit, because you have really nothing to go after unless you find a magic way of producing toilet paper within the next 5 minutes. Then you're probably pretty okay. But
well, the latest thing, commodity that's being hoarded is hair color.
Is that a reference here?
Yeah. well, we both. I just hide mine by taking it off.
Yeah, I'm slowly but surely.
Yeah, the ladies are hoarding hair color. But
yeah, why not? To each their own, right?
Yeah, but there's this whole human. You talked earlier about greed, and human behavior. So in my life, I think let's count them up here. I think 5 or 6 major economic storms. So I remember the gas crisis in the 70s, when there was a shortage of fuel, particularly in the United States, because of the embargo. Then in the 80s, that's number one. Then in the 80s, we had interest rates over 20% because of inflation. Then in 98, the price of oil went from, the world price of oil was around $12, $13, almost overnight went to $8. The entire oil industry in the province of Alberta, where I live, ground to a complete halt. Nobody was making any capital expenditures at all. Then we had 9/11, 2001, 9/11. Then 2008, the financial crisis, and now 2020. The one thing that I know, the thing that struck me, particularly in the 80s, I was a manufacturer's rep on straight commission. So if I didn't sell something, I didn't get paid. If my customers didn't pay the bill, my commissions got reversed. So very quickly, it was very important. After a certain point, if your customer didn't pay the bill, your commissions got reversed. So it was very important to collect. So suddenly I turned into this bill collector. I remember this conversation with this one client. He said, please don't cut me off. I'll just have to go somewhere else. But if you cut me off, I'll have to go somewhere else. And I don't know when you're going to get paid. But here's the problem. When I get paid, I'll pay you. But people aren't paying me. So what do? There was this real interdependence. We had to have these very real conversations. And I remember driving through the industrial area of Calgary, Alberta, where I was living at the time, and looking around and realizing how interdependent and how much nothing that we have currently could ever, you wouldn't be able to sit where you're sitting that if someone didn't have a vision to build that building, that didn't imagine that there would be a need for something. I mean, the entrepreneurial ethic, the vision, the seeing the gap, filling the gap, and whether that's greed. I mean, greed is a part. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, to a certain degree, there's an amount of greed. There's an amount of willing and desire to serve people. But so, you know, we're really interdependent, much more than we realize.
I think with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, we became interdependent. And I mean, frankly, we were interdependent beforehand, just not at massive scale. Now we're interdependent at scale, and there is no way back.
Right.
Complete self-reliance, although possible, I mean, it's difficult. It requires us to almost go into, well, social isolation.
Right.
So,
and you talked about social isolation. You want to see the worst of humanity, lock people up for a while. You know, prevent them from socializing. So I think there's a significant challenge here. But it comes back to, it seems to me, communications, our ability to communicate effectively. Not only do we have to plan all that, at some point, we have to frickin' talk to one another. We have to negotiate. I think we have to collaborate, and we have to cooperate. And, you know, we have to also consider what's for the greater good.
But it also depends on how we talk to one another. And it also, moreover, depends, what do we say to ourselves?
That's exactly right. So it comes back to what goes on in this box that we live in between our ears, the thoughts that we have. And again, finding some balance between totally living within our own thoughts and projections and judgments and, you know, projections of how we wish things would be, how things should be, somewhere between that and the brutal reality of what's actually my situation right now, somewhere in between there, we need to find that space. And so I think, because now, what do you think? I mean, because what's your vision for this, for you trying to start up during this time in terms of your communication, consulting? Like, what do you think about what I'm saying here about communication?
Well, it's twofold. It's not just communications consulting. It's essentially industrial organizational psychology consulting. Communication is a subset of that, because if I'm not communicating my position, then I am not gonna get anywhere, because at the end of the day, my position needs to be explained. It needs to ask and offer collaboration. And It needs to outline very clearly the terms of engagement. Now, that is not necessarily saying that my terms of engagement are one-sided. This goes back now to the collaboration, right? It goes to mutual benefit. It goes toward If I have a business with an existing membership or existing client pool, how am I communicating to them what my position is? It's about reassurances, about clarity, about just simply ambiguity avoidance. Because the one thing that we are surrounded by right now, and I would say, quite frankly, many people are drowning in it, is uncertainty.
Yeah.
So the thing that you certainly don't want to do is add to that.
Right. So how does a business owner, how do you approach that, avoiding the uncertainty and ambiguity with so much uncertainty? How would you, I mean, what would you say to an entrepreneur or business owner, or an individual for that matter?
Well, for one, don't lie.
Okay.
I mean, it's really that simple. I mean,
Yeah.
you can be encouraging all day, every day, but the point is, if you're masking your own position in times of vulnerability, you better be either invulnerable or you're lying. I mean, that's simply the way it is. Now, the point here is, just because you're essentially honest about your position doesn't mean that you come across as whiner, doesn't mean that you're immediately asking for a handout. It just means to say, hey, listen, people, I relate because I'm in a similar position as you are. Here's what it does to my business. Here's how I've served you in the past, how I'm planning to serve you in the future, and here's what we're doing in the immediate. And this is what I'm going to extend to you. In order for me to do that, I need X from you. So
Right.
again, it is collaborative in nature. And the point is that the more I'm trying to talk around that, the more I'm trying to beat around the bush, the less I'm gonna get done. But there's also the other side of the coin, that if I'm too fast, too harsh, too to the point, I'm gonna lose the emotional appeal. So somewhere in between, depending on what you're doing and how you've done it in the past, what your psychological makeup is, how people have come to understand and getting to know you, is your personal truth. To make one blanket statement, like a million consultants are doing, it's like, here is your prescription and this is how you succeed, is perhaps there's some general truths and some generalizable wisdoms, but at the end of the day, communication is personal. Communication is personalized, and it is very intricate to who you are. And it's impossible to put this in a blueprint to say, and this is the ultimate way to succeed, which is also one of my biggest beefs that I have with every single consultant being out there.
So you're saying personal, personalized.
Yep.
And what's the third item?
I don't remember what I said.
Well, you said something personal, personalized, and it's hooked into who you are.
Yeah, it's hooked into who you are and how people have come to know you.
So your
Because
identity.
Here's the thing. Correct. Because
Okay.
here's the thing. If you were to say something that is not in congruence with how you've established your personal brand, suddenly you become somebody completely different. It is, I think, quite obvious that you're now putting on a mask. And that mask is going to get you so far until that mask crumbles, because it is not a long-term solution.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically you're talking about tell the truth, don't lie. So that requires, I think that requires something that I don't think they teach in marketing school.
Nope.
Transparency.
Yep. And let me also just get to the point here. I am not a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk's insistence that vulnerability is the new keyword. I think there's vulnerability, and then there's so much vulnerability that it's ridiculous. There's a fine line. There is a, hey, we are just as impacted as everybody else. No, we are not doing as stellar as we want to. Yes, it is questionable whether or not we're going to be existing at the end of this. But here's what we're prepared to do. Here's how we can collaborate. Here's what we can offer you. And in return, can you offer X to us? Because that's the only way to make it through this. If I'm just sitting here and think, oh my God, the world is ending, and I'm super vulnerable, I'm not going to get out of the narrative. I'm not going to establish something where people actually look to me as well for leadership. It is collaborative leadership.
Yeah.
And again, it's that there is no winning if I'm positioning like that.
Yeah, that's very, it reminds, what you're saying reminds me a lot of 2002, 2003. I started a business, a web development business in Houston 3 weeks before the second Iraq war.
Mhm.
We launched and opened, and it was a tough 9 months because we had just started to get some momentum. We got some projects, created some revenue, created some cash flow, and suddenly, you know, it's like the economy was clamped shut. Business owners were not willing to invest in their website because they didn't know what was happening. They didn't know how much money they're going to have. Their customers were, their cash flow had changed substantially. It was really interesting. I guess in terms of, here's what we can do for you. What can you do for us? That kind of conversation requires a certain amount of transparency whereas the typical, here's who we are, we're the greatest, and we're going to do this for you, and here, sign here, 3 equal payments, whatever, right? That whole blunder bust bullshit. But it tears those walls down. It reminds me of this time because we had very real conversations. People saw the value of what we did. They just didn't know how they were going to pay for it. So we got creative. Some clients we take a certain amount down and payments per month type of thing, or they knew they'd have cash flow going down the way. We would do it based on but ultimately we had to be really flexible. You had to just talk about things. You couldn't hide behind, like you say, a mask, and you couldn't lie. But fortunately, we just kept going forward, continuing focusing on building the relationship. So I would fly down from Canada down there for 3 weeks to support the team. Then I'd fly back for 3 weeks. Did that for about 2.5 years. Finally, my business partner bought me out, which was great. And that business is still operating today. But we built so much momentum because we had the conversations. And we had such a massive pipeline, and we had really continued to network our faces off. After 9 months, when things started to turn around September 2003, we grew like mad because we had built so many relationships during the tough time. I would say that these are defining moments for business owners and entrepreneurs, because how you show up now is going to create the loyalty for when things do turn around.
If you have the capacity to show up in the right manner.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, if you are reliant on, let's say, same-day revenue, a clothing boutique, your hands are tied.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're in the space that you and I are in, for instance, my doors are wide open.
Yes.
In fact, one of the reasons why I decided to bring Symbiotic back is, after having shut the doors in 2016, is because I believe that now it is needed. And my proposition actually is one that flies against the idea of now is the time that you capitalize. And I'm following a couple of Facebook groups, and I just upped my prices, and people are so desperate right now that I got 3 signups a day and at $8,000 a day. And some people that you and I actually know, who are common acquaintances of ours, are actually members of this group. And it drives me up the wall because I find it, for one, predatory, for another, incredibly ethically challenging to do that. Now, do I see the fiscal reasoning behind it, the greed economy, the yes, make hay while the sun shines? Sure. Do I find it adequate and acceptable? Absolutely not. So I'm going the exact opposite direction.
Okay,
I'm bringing
tell me about
Symbiotic. Yeah, I'm bringing Symbiotic back at absolutely zero cost. None. I'm offering pro bono hours, or I'm going to offer pro bono hours. I'm actually just re-registered my domain. Haven't built my website yet. I'm just now getting ready to actually hopefully find somebody to build me a logo. I'm not exactly sure how much it's going to cost. Maybe I can barter services. I don't know. and bring my LinkedIn profile back and actually start servicing, start serving, start to collaborate, start to actually offer something that I have that others perhaps do not have and want and desire and need at this point in time, where there is true need. And if you believe that I've done something of value and you have $1 to contribute as an entrepreneur, sure, I'll take it. I'm not going to turn down money, but I'm not going to insist on money. I'm there to help. I'm there to build relationships. Now, full disclosure, much like you did back in Houston, I'm certainly doing this quote unquote out of the goodness of my heart right now, but there is of course a long range plan that by the time that we've all recovered, I have so many fruitful, positive, valuable connections that it allows me to continue my consultancy. And it allows me to continue my consultancy without having to look back and say, what kind of an asshat was I to take advantage of people, lock them into some form of contract? That's just not who I am. And again, whoever is like that, more power to you. If you can look yourself in the mirror in the evening, fine. But I will argue with every single person, my perspective, if they choose to do so, that I believe that I have the ethical high ground in providing assistance and help when it is needed the most. We can talk about money later.
Well, it's interesting. I had a conversation with, looks like a new client. And, you know, we were talking about different things and the statement was made, Greg, I've been listening to you for free for like 3 or 4 years. It's time for me to pay. I mean, okay. I mean, it's, you know, at this stage of my life, I choose what projects I do. I don't have to make, you know, I have to make it, I like to make a certain amount of extra money because it allows me to do certain things. But, you know, the thing is that, you know, I made a note as you were talking, is that you've created so many relationships and created so much value. There's going to be a natural enrollment, an organic enrollment without the high pressure because of the high value. Is that what you're, what I'm hearing?
To some degree. And again, this is not, there are no strings attached to anything I'm saying. In the context of building my website and building out my LinkedIn profile again and talking more about my background. And you know that I usually really don't like to talk about myself, but in this case, I'm gonna probably have to.
You think?
Yeah, I'm going to just literally offer my hours for free. Yes, there are going to be some limitations in a sense that no, I can't sit with you for 8 hours. I do have some stuff to do to make some money as well, but I can be booked in hour intervals when my public calendar is available. And I will familiarize myself with your situation and see what your needs are and whether I even have any valuable input or something that I believe is suggestible. And if the conversation ends up to be just a great conversation and we've had a phenomenal interaction and there's presently nothing that I can do in good conscience to actually help, then I'm going to say that just as well, because the last thing I want to do right now is find somebody who is in an essentially dire situation, take your money, not provide value, and then essentially look at my balance book and say, all right, I did well. I don't give two shits how you did. This is not how we're going to get out of this.
Yeah, don't waste people's time, because that's the one thing none of us ever get back. We're never going to get back the time we spent talking about this.
Correct.
On this video. Now, that's really interesting. Okay, so tell me about the name symbiotic.
Yes.
So
symbiotic with an IQ.
Oh,
it's a
okay.
little bit of a word hack.
Okay.
Symbiotic with an IQ. Well, the reason behind symbiotic is that no matter what we do, it is always relationship based. It
Okay.
completely is inconsequential. The business you're in, the manufacturing, the thought space, it doesn't matter. It's always relational. And relations are best when they're symbiotic.
Okay. And explain
And
symbiotic for the, it's not a common word.
well, let's just call it a beneficial relationship that serves both parties or all parties, for that matter, in the most equivalent way.
Okay.
And there's a whole argument with social equity and business equity behind that, in a sense that no, it will never be truly 50-50. I think that's an illusion. But in the long run, it should be equal parts.
Okay.
So if I'm contributing, and I think there's another layer to this, if I'm contributing to you as a business, I hope that what you take from me, you can contribute to your clients, to your staff. Again, symbiotic relationships. The bee needs the flower needs the bee. It is
Right.
symbiotic. And the IQ essentially is that in the business world, we need intelligence. We need intelligence that's based on either emotional intelligence, on narrative intelligence, or on quantitative intelligence. So qualitative and quantitative. I was banging around with the idea of completely word hacking this and go with EQ, which is my line of psychology in the organizational space. I'm all about emotion in the workspace. But symbiotic, so to speak, would have been way too far out of left field. So symbiotic with an IQ made a little more sense. So that's where this is coming from.
Because the conversation that Amethyst and I have had around life origami is that when push comes to shove, whatever we do and how we work with people, fundamentally we're looking to help them build emotional resilience. And
tell me more about this.
Well, I mean, the resilience is the ability to bounce back. You know, the resilient. If you look at the definition of the word resilience, it's that it's the ability that to face an obstacle, to face a challenge, and to bounce back from setbacks. To have the emotional resilience. That means the resilience to manage what goes on in our minds as we through our self-talk, through our projections, our judgments, and primarily our frame of reference, how we view the world. We've gathered a lifetime of experiences, and some of those experiences are actually hindrances to us moving forward. And some of those experiences are actually freaking wisdom. Like, for example, you know, as a business owner, you know, imagine how much, Michael, the world would change if every business owner looked at the business through the lens of beneficial relationships that serves all parties in an equitable way. Holy frig. We would not be, United States of America would not be in the situation it's in today. The world would not be in the situation where these battles over taxes and tariffs and all that bullshit. That wouldn't take place because it's inequitable. But you could argue that capitalism is fundamentally inequitable because it's utilizing. I remember many years ago, I ran into a businessman and he made this ask of me. I said, I can't do that. He said, that's okay, because it's my job to take advantage of you and it's your job not to let me. I thought, what a jaded, bloody point of view. But it's a typical capitalist, greed-based way of thinking. So I think
Milton Friedman waves his hand.
Sorry?
Milton Friedman waves his hand.
Yeah.
Right? Capitalism and
yeah.
greed. And I mean, of course, we can go pop culture and have
Greed
Michael Douglas
good.
as exactly. Greed is good. Gordon Gekko.
You want the truth? You can't handle the truth.
Exactly. So, and then I look at, I think, Seattle-based Gravity Payments, which is an online payment processing provider, where the CEO dropped his salary, and they don't hold me to the exact number, Um,
70,000.
I think so. And every
Everybody
employee
gets
makes minimum
70,000.
70. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, that is social responsibility. And let's face it. Uh, again, how many millions do you need to feel secure? And in fact, funny that we are at this point, I found a photo today that was on Instagram shared by somebody else. And the wording, and I'm loosely paraphrasing, was that the world doesn't need any billionaires, none, zero. You should be allowed to get to 999 million, and every cent beyond that needs to be contributed to education, to schools, to social programs, to generalized healthcare, and so forth. And in exchange, you get a dog park named after you. It's like, it's brilliant. I'm 100% in agreement with that, because of the fact that if you have 999 billion in personal wealth, what's your angle?
Yeah.
You have no leg to stand on at all. You are taken care of, plus your next 50 generations are taken care of. You don't need another red cent.
True.
In fact, given interest rates, obviously not right now, but in regular times, I think there was a calculation at some point where if you conservatively invest, you can live off the interest without touching your principal after like $20 million or something like that. So why do you even need 999 other than for
sure.
personal satisfaction? Now, we can talk about the psychology behind this, and we'll never get done. But I think there needs to be the intersection between psychology, rationale, management of dysfunction, and social responsibility.
Okay. Interesting. Well, so then so why, so how would you, let's wind this up. We've been going for an hour here. I'd like you to wind up by explaining to people what kind of the big picture is of how you work with them, and how them working towards creating a symbiotic, beneficial relationships with everybody in an equitable way. How is that going to really, how's that going to make a difference to their current lot or their current situation?
To make sense out of this, just a brief synopsis of my background.
Yeah.
My background is in organizational communications, strategic comm, and crisis comm. So
Now you say
in other
comm,
words,
you talk about communications. That's an
correct,
educated term. Yeah. You talk
oh
about,
yeah, sorry.
so put it in
Yes.
English for us non.
Yeah, it is organizational, strategic, and crisis communication. Essentially is my background in my master's degree, my PhD, organizational psychology.
Okay.
The intent is that the manner in which I can help is by individualizing the approach. Again, there are some generalized truths. In other words, don't lie. Be forthright, be forthcoming. Sounds incredibly naive, but it really depends on how you apply that lens so that it actually becomes beneficial to all involved. It is an individualized approach. It is an approach that I sit actually with the individual, with the person that has a need, to figure out what is that need. What is their business proposition that they are actually having their existence hinging upon? What is their personal disposition in terms of psychology and in terms of financial viability? Not for me to make money, but the financial viability of the individual is indicative as to how much pressure they're under. And that also then, of course, trickles back into psychology and emotion and momentum and pressure and all kinds of associated side effects. Then the third layer to this conversation.
Go ahead. No.
The third layer to the conversation is, who are you serving? And what is the manner in which you're serving them with or through? So this triple, so to speak, allows me to actually look at, okay, where are you at? How do you feel? Where do you need to be? And how do we communicate this to your base?
So it's basically four things of what I'm hearing: the individualized approach, you know, what their needs are, how do you feel about what your needs are, what you need to communicate, and who you're serving.
Correct.
And then with that information, then what do they do?
They essentially work with me on a plan, or I work with them on a plan, meaning that first things first, let's take care of you. What does it even mean, right? We can easily throw out all kinds of stereotypical phrases that we commonly find on Instagram, neatly framed in something. You can't pour from the cup that's empty. Well, that's great, but what is your cup like, and how do we fill up your cup? Because your feeling looks entirely different than my feeling.
Right.
So what does this actually mean? And how do we get you to do that? And what is the desired outcome? Because again, if the desired outcome is not emotionally measurable, and that can be something as easily as, yeah, I feel fantastic today. That is an emotional equation that I can measure. Because if I can ask you 3 times a week, how do you feel? And you tell me you feel great because you did X, Y, Z, well, now we have a measurable. Or if you say, well, I didn't feel that at all, I know we need to look at something else. Perhaps you were not honest with yourself. What do you need? Let's talk.
Okay.
And based on that, we can then again address what is your financial viability, what is your situation, what are your contributors, what are the sources of your ailments, where do you need to be to continue on. At times, it asks for hard calls that, maybe you shouldn't continue on.
Right.
And I think that's just as fair of an assessment.
So it sounds like core to what you do is to find you said an emotional outcome.
Yes.
Okay. So one thing that pops to mind right away is how do you prevent that from being manipulative?
Tell me one situation that's not manipulative.
Well, okay, but I mean, if this whole thing of having beneficial relationships, something that's equitable, how does the emotional outcome play into that? I mean, I think I know, but I'm not the consultant here. You are.
Well, for one, I think manipulation gets a bad rep.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be negative.
Okay.
I can manipulate something positively, right?
Sure.
I can consult you to saying, or to arriving at an emotional equilibrium, hopefully that's positive in nature. And that positivity of your position allows you to communicate with those who you serve in an entirely different manner.
Absolutely. So it all comes, my observation is, if I was sitting on the other side of the desk and you're saying that you're going to help me, manipulation is good. It comes down to intent. Is your intent to create something that's beneficial and equitable, and it's going to be good for all, and it's a very intentional manipulation for the good of all. I think it moves out of manipulation. It becomes a leadership. It becomes leadership.
Yeah, and leadership is by nature manipulative.
Yep. So it comes down to what's the intent, and it really comes back to, is it equitable?
Yeah, and I think commonly, particularly in Western societies, especially in the US, we are focusing outcome-wise too much on profitability.
Yeah.
Too much on greed. Well, what if the outcome is the intention to say, I want to serve my constituency, my customers, my clients, my members? I think that is a very noble outcome, provided that it is established in the correct manner. Now, there is a reciprocal effect though. Those who are being served by whoever the client is usually stay on with the client. So if you want to make it out of this, how do you talk to the people that actually want something, need something, rely on you, or even just in passing need you?
Yeah.
but you can provide something of value. And that's exactly what I'm setting up to do. I mean, I'm not doing anything different than anybody else should do in saying, well, right now I'm in the luxurious position, also as a professor, I don't necessarily need the income from Symbiotic, but I'm also very conscious of my time. So I will offer pro bono hours. And again, if you see value, fine, I'll take a couple of dollars. If you don't have the couple of dollars, but it's still valuable, awesome. Because I figure, and this may be a 50% shot, that after everything is said and done, and you have recovered, that you might want to stay on as client. Well, then we'll talk about money.
Right. So because the thing is as the leader, so in this case, leaders invest up front. They have an idea, they have a concept of something that they think could be equitable, right? And they invest themselves, their energy, their focus, and their communications in a way they invest up front, basically to serve. Because if you, as a leader, if you don't show up that way, you'll never have a chance to serve.
And I'll give you one better on the investment.
Sorry?
I'll give you one better on the investment side of things.
Yeah.
Time.
Keep going.
It's the ultimate currency.
Right.
If you trust me enough to sit with me for an hour, or maybe in an extended relationship for several hours, you're investing your time. Things that I cannot pay you back. Things that you cannot get back. Same goes for me. I am investing my time. So let's talk about reciprocal relationships and equity again, right? We are both investing the same currency at the same time for the same duration. Right. That is symbiotic.
Right. Well, the thing that, yeah, absolutely. But the thing that I think is important is that both of you have to invest up front to try to get any benefit from it.
Absolutely.
And because if you don't put, so your first thing that you have to invest as a leader, for you to be able to truly help people, you have to invest your time. You're going to have to build a website, create some content, and initiate and spend some time getting the message out to hope to gain attention, to be able, so that you can begin to serve people, to be able to create some equity. And I think that's the thing that the Gary Vaynerchuks and the Anthony Robbins and all those others out there is that they forget, is that there's this thing called equity. You have to create the emotional and the emotional equity, and you have to earn the right to speak into someone's life.
Yeah, and then please don't do it through platitudes.
Well, we could spend another hour talking about that. So we've gone about an hour and 15 minutes here. This has been fascinating and fun. So Michael, how can people reach you? Like my intent is to put this up on YouTube and post it. I'm going to put it all over LinkedIn, Facebook, all of that. How do you want people to reach you?
Well, again, since everything is in its recreated infancy, it's difficult to track down my business, if you will. But on LinkedIn, you can just look for Symbiotic with an IQ, and you should find Symbiotic IO Consultant. So follow there, and future content is forthcoming and hopefully up pretty soon. Website is symbiotic.iq.co, again, to be built. On social, I do have an Instagram profile established for it, but nothing loaded quite yet. Again, this has been born again yesterday.
So what is so spell it for us.
It's SY, M as in Michael, BIOT as in Tom, IQ, Symbiotic.
Okay, Symbiotic.
.co. .co.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah, and personally, you can, well, personally, I really don't have much business to say. So it's probably best to just look for me business-wise, because my alter ego on social is a little different.
Find Michael on LinkedIn.
Yes, you can certainly do that for sure.
So, so they do search for Symbiotic on LinkedIn, or you?
Correct. That would be an option. You can look me up on LinkedIn personally as well. And my last name under which you find me is JA, H as in Henry, N as in North and L as in Lima.
Got it.
And you can
Michael, how do you pronounce that?
Jahnl.
Jahnl?
Depends on where you are. If you're in Europe and you speak German, then it's Jahnl. If you are in the US and you speak English, it's Jahnl. I'll go by either.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, listen, folks, if you really, there's a great opportunity here to put Michael to work to create some symbiotic, equitable relationships in your life and in your business. Good luck to you, Michael. Thanks for spending some time. I learned something today.
You did?
Yeah, well,
of course, you know I'm going to have to ask what that was now.
Well, I mean, I learned about, I mean, we were thinking about emotional resilience, but the beneficial relationship, the equitable relationships, and manipulation is okay. It all depends on your intent. I think that's you know, manipulation, we all do it. Nobody talks about it. It's the elephant in the room. It all comes back to intent. Are you intending to serve or intending to rob people? You know, I think it really is that simple. And so I think that this could be the perfect storm for you to really help people. And the fact that, yeah, I mean, the way that I always say to coaches, I used to coach coaches, the way you sell coaching is to give coaching. Give them a taste. It's you're creating an experience for people ultimately, for them to be able to go out and create an experience for their customers. This is an Apple Pencil, right? You can go to the store. Well, can't go to the store right now, but you can order one and you can hold it. Experiences can't be held; they have to be experienced. There's a deliverer of the experience, and there's the experiencer, and we're dependent on one another. We can't create without somebody to create with. So in that respect, I think your approach is right on the money. How do people know whether or not they want to hire you or whether or not it's going to be a benefit if they never talk to you, if you never talk to them? So it's a perfect opportunity. It's a perfect storm here. Need for communication has never been higher. And the need, and if you can wrap your head around finding a way to make something beneficial, something that's equitable for all parties involved, it's going to pay off eventually. It has to. By the simple law of cause and effect, it has to result in something.
In a nutshell, I am intently manipulating the situation.
Right.
But again, no malicious intent here.
Right.
Just the intent to help and be of service. And that, I mean, there is positive manipulation. And again, if that conversation doesn't result in anything, great. At least we've tried. No harm, no foul.
Yeah. Bingo.
It's that simple.
Right on. So check out Michael Jahnl. How do you say it?
Jahnl.
Jahnl. Sorry.
Yeah.
Michael Jahnl. Check out Michael Jahnl on LinkedIn. Search for Symbiotic. Take him up on his offer. Have a conversation with him. See if you can learn something about yourself, your business, your clients, and see if you can improve your communication and the way you're approaching things to create a beneficial, for an equitable win-win.
A symbiotic relationship.
A symbiotic relationship. So thanks, Michael. This was fun.
Greg, it was a pleasure. Thanks.
You're welcome. Check them out.